Well, hi everybody and welcome once again to my video blog. First of all, I'd like to say I'm sorry I haven't made a video in over 2 weeks now. The reason for that is that I've been pretty busy with university. I'm actually thinking of changing supervisors, so perhaps working again in the area of compilers and programming languages instead of working in artificial intelligence and machine learning. So I've been meeting other supervisors at my current university, and I've been working on assignments, and I've also been working on a publication that I have submitted just today. So yeah, there's been many things on my mind, and I haven't really had the time, but here it is today. This is going to be the second video in my beginning transition series, and today I'm going to talk about some first steps that you can make in actually beginning the transition. So the first video that I made in this series was called Figuring Yourself Out, and the point I wanted to make is that you should explore your own gender identity and get in touch with other trans people to figure out whether or not transition is something that you want. Try to get an idea whether you are a cross-dresser or transsexual or transvestite or something else, where you stand on the gender spectrum. Get a better idea of what you want. But basically, at this point, I assume that you are seriously thinking about transition, but maybe you're not sure, and that's normal. Which is why I'm going to talk about some first steps that I'm going to say are non-committal steps. So some first things that you can do when you're beginning transition without forcing yourself to actually go with it. So I think it's important when you transition to go at your own pace, like I said, because I think you have to find your own comfort level, and so I don't think you should be forcing yourself ever. I don't think you should be putting deadlines on yourself. I don't think you should just go and say, yes, I'm going to go with this, and in a year from now I'm going to have had sexual reassignment and facial feminization surgery and blah blah blah. I don't think you should ever put deadlines like that. I think it's important to not go too fast, to be prudent, to be careful, and hence some non-committal steps that you can do. So in my last video I already mentioned that you should probably try to buy some clothes of your desired gender, so buy some female clothes or male clothes on eBay, for example, and start going out, start integrating yourself in the local trans community if possible, talk to people, etc. Those are some very easy steps that you can make to explore your gender identity. But there's actually some other things you can do to actually kind of start transition, for example, such as changing your appearance. So that can mean changing your hairstyle, start to shave body hair if you're male to female, tweezing your eyebrows, maybe even permanent hair removal, because I personally always found body hair annoying, and when I started transition I just figured, I'm just gonna start with laser hair removal on my face because I hate shaving, and even if I don't end up actually transitioning, I'm going to be glad to be rid of the facial hair. So I think you can do permanent hair removal even if you're not actually sure that you're going to go with transition. And even if you decide to not transition in the end, I don't think it's a huge loss if you can't grow a beard afterwards, or if you can't grow arm hair. So that's something that you might want to think about doing. And you can also start changing your clothing style. So if you're male to female, that would mean starting to dress more feminine. Instead of buying guys' jeans, you would buy girls' jeans. You can buy them, somewhat loose. You can buy girls' t-shirts that are, don't have any obvious feminine logos on them. And the purpose of that is just to, slowly feminize your appearance over time. This is something I did when I started my transition during my undergrad. I started dressing more feminine, but very progressively. And nobody actually ever commented on it. I think some people eventually noticed, but nobody was shocked by my transition and my feminization because it was done over a long period of time. And I think it helped me, get more comfortable with it progressively. Because you're going to find probably, if you're male to female, that the first time you wear some women's jeans in public, you're going to be like, oh my god, are people going to see it? Are they going to make comments, etc.? But likely you're going to notice that people just don't see it. In most cases, they don't see any difference. So, the purpose of changing your clothing style is to just get more comfortable with it yourself and, progress to the first steps, in feminizing your appearance. And, I think it's important to do this. I think some people, when I talk already about shaving your arm hair and shaving your armpit hair and your leg hair, some people will be like, well, I would do that, but people at work are gonna see it and I don't want them to know that I'm trans and I don't want them to ask questions and blah blah blah. But I'd like to say, if you are seriously thinking about transitioning from male to female or from female to male, you are going to have to make some very serious changes in your life. You're going to have to make some much bigger changes in your appearance. And if you can't shave your arm hair, you're not meant to transition, in my opinion. You have to be able to get the courage to do things like that. As a transsexual, I think you have to be able to gather the courage to do simple things like that. It will help you later on to get the courage to do bigger things. So I think, shaving your arm and your leg hair, if you're male to female, is just practice, for bigger changes. And if people ask you why you did that, you just tell them because you wanted to. You tell them it's your right. And if people make fun of you, you give them the finger. I think that's how it should be. You should be able to do these things, and maybe it's going to be stressful for you when you start, but it will get progressively easier. I'm not saying you have to give everybody the finger and be mean to everyone. Some people might ask questions because they're really curious, but really the point for you is to be confident with making changes in your appearance and doing things to feminize or masculinize yourself. So anyways, those are things that you can do on your own that are non-committal, that if you do, you don't have to transition. Another thing you might want to do is to think about getting a gender therapist. A gender therapist is someone who will help you understand yourself, will help you understand what you are, where you stand, where you want to go. They're experts in the area of transsexuality and all that, and they will help you really figure yourself out better, understand yourself, and eventually they should help you get hormones. If you keep going with them for a little while, eventually they will evaluate, or they will help you evaluate whether or not transition is for you. And if they think the transition is for you, they will give you reference letters for hormones, and eventually also for seeing a psychiatrist and for SRS and all that, if that's what you want. So getting a gender therapist is kind of important. It's something you should do. But it's not necessarily easy to find one, If you just go and ask your family doctor about, a gender therapist, they probably won't be able to help you. You would have to call a local association of psychologists, for example, or sexologists. But even then, they might not be absolutely sure who to send you to. I think the best way to find a good gender therapist is to talk to local transsexuals who are already transitioning, and they will probably know about good gender therapists in your area. You can consult the TS Roadmap website. They have some tips for finding a good gender therapist, or you can just Google gender therapist, and you'll find a lot of pages that will help you get some tips, and even have a list of known gender therapists on there. Once you found a gender therapist, they'll help you get on with your transition. But the next step after that, if you keep transitioning, would probably be hormones. If you keep going on with the transition. But before you go on with hormones, which I'm not going to talk about in this video, I would advise that you think about freezing sperm if you're male to female, or freezing embryos or eggs if you are female to male. I think it's not as much as a problem for female to male transsexuals, because it's actually fairly possible that you will be able to still conceive a baby if you stop hormones later on. But for male to female transsexuals, you should know that if you get on hormones, it will make you temporarily infertile. You will stop producing sperm, and eventually you might become completely sterile after being on hormones for too long. And if you are remotely thinking, remotely considering the possibility of having a child at some point, you probably want to think about freezing sperm. You can look up information on the internet about how to do that, but it's not that expensive. It cost me something like $500 for 3 samples, and then after that it just cost me like $100 a year to keep them frozen. And that basically gives you like a guarantee that if you decide to have a child at some point later on, you can have a child that's genetically your own. And you might be thinking, I don't need to freeze sperm and all that because I'll just be able to adopt a child. But you have to realize that it's actually pretty hard to adopt a child later on. Adoption agencies can put you in very long waiting lists, and sometimes have restrictions that you have to have been married for so many years, and sometimes they could even discriminate against you because you're transsexual. So those are real problems, and I'll just say I don't know any transsexual person who has adopted a child. So think about those things, and do freeze sperm. It's not very expensive, and it protects your fertility for when you actually do get on hormones. So hormones are going to be the topic of the next video. I have a fair amount of things to say about them. But that's it for today. I hope this was helpful. So that's my take-home advice, basically. Once you are comfortable with the idea of transition a little bit more, and you start thinking it's for you, and you have made some trans friends online, you should start making some small changes in your life, some non-committal changes, and probably look for a gender therapist. Okay, so that's it for today, people. Bye-bye.